It is important for us to understand how possibly could Hamas have pulled this off without Israel's intelligence agencies and defense mechanism realizing what was unfolding. Look at the map that we've prepared for you. This is, of course, Israeli territory, and this is the Gaza Strip, the 365 square kilometers. Now, this is where they came to attack in southern Israel, where the civilians in their homes, enjoying the holiday, relaxing, and they started to massacre one by one, specifically children. From the Gaza Strip, this is where, kilometers away from the Israel border, we are being told, according to our OSINT team, that with open source investigation that has been done, that there were these paragliding training camps. They literally created areas that were mock setups. What would Israeli settlements really be, or Israeli villages would be in the Israeli territory. So that is when you attack. How would that attack be? Look at this. This is where, not one, but there were at least 8 to 9 locations from Gaza Strip where they attacked into southern Israel. Remember, Beeri was completely destroyed. Khwar Aza was where there were the areas, civilian residential localities, where people were also killed. These were different areas. And including Sderot, remember, where this has become now a ghost town. Civilian movement is not being permitted. Our colleagues have also reported from the southern Israel Sderot area. So these were different locations where these Hamas extremists managed to come. So many locations, so much of training that was happening, possibly, according to our information, even from 2020. How could all of this possibly escape? And that's why questions are being raised to Israel, which was once known as a country with the most solid defense mechanism, keeping its civilians safe, specifically for the borders, the hostile neighbors that Israel is surrounded by. So I want to now bring in my colleague who's been to Sderot, who reported from that location. Gaurav Sawant is now joining me. Gaurav, we're trying to explain to the viewers how different locations in southern Israel were targeted. But a question is being raised that Hamas extremists clearly could not have pulled this off within a few weeks. This was a long-term plan. What are you hearing about it, about how long and perhaps funded, contributed, supported by other terror groups too?
So the information that we've been able to pick up from officials here in Israel is that this training went on and the preparation went on not for months but for years. In some instances, the weapons were put together, the rockets were brought together for a period of almost 2 years. That is how long back the preparation started. As our OSINT team also very correctly pointed out and is being pointed out on ground here, the Hamas, the engineering college was actually turned into a military training ground, and that engineering college was pounded completely, decimated yesterday in the rocket attack and air attacks that Israeli Air Force mounted, because this is where the hang glider training took place. Militarized training also took place overseas is what we've been told. One of the locations we are told was also Lebanon, but that's subject to confirmation. Low-level insertion is done by special forces into hostile territory, not by ragtag bunch of terrorists. Incidentally, this would pose a threat for any country that has a hostile neighbor, including India, where terrorists could use hang gliders to try and come in and infiltrate in future. But that is where it's not just intelligence and it's not just technology that you rely on, because your systems could be hacked, they could be overridden. It's the man on ground. Every barrier has to be manned to be effective. That's an old military thinking, but that old military thinking, and that is why if I were to compare the situation in India, while you have a 770-kilometer long line of control,
Correct.
You have Indian Army pickets and patrolling that happens constantly all along. You have battalions deployed all along the 770-kilometer long LOC, because just technology itself cannot guarantee foolproof security, as Israel is only now realizing. Also having your eyes on the enemy. You know, Hamas has learned to have lulled Israel into thinking that it's more interested now in governing the Gaza Strip and not carry out massive military attacks. And while it was training for these military attacks, again, the Indian Army thinking is, if a terrorist is not operational for some time, then the terrorist is planning something big, and it's not because he's turned peaceful. So that mindset, Israel knows it well, and perhaps Israel realizes it, that it would have to more effectively, now take on these terrorists, which it is doing right now. Right now, as we speak, Israeli Air Force fighter jets are taking off to decimate those maze of tunnels, especially the ones where they have intelligence about storage of weapons and movement of weapons and systems and Hamas leadership. At the same time, the challenge remains big because the hostages are a major issue. Dozens and dozens of Israeli hostages are still in Hamas territory, and that is where they hope that international assistance will come in to ensure repatriation of the hostages.
I can only imagine what the hostages are feeling right now, what is their situation. But I'm glad, Gaurav, that you made the mention of Indian Army and compared it with India, because it's important for the viewer also to understand what our borders are like and why there is border security force in such long borders constantly patrolling, and the Indian Army too keeping a watch. Because remember that could Israel have underestimated the enemy, thinking Hamas isn't as powerful, will not do anything.